Wow, 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 wow. No, 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 no. Whew. Wow, it's so early. I mean, didn't we just wrap a few minutes ago? Well, I mean, we could shoot until 1 a.m. in the morning and be back on set at 8 a.m. in the morning, but all the coffee in the world won't help much here, my friends, right? There is a reason why we have these buffers between finishing one shooting day and starting another shooting day. And these buffers are called rest periods or turnaround times. And violations of rest periods are known as forced calls. And forced calls can be dangerous, expensive, and quite often forced calls are simply illegal. That's why it's even more important to show you how timekeeping apps can help you track expenses and warn you of potential conflicts. So here's another video for all you hardworking people on set and at the production office. And today's topic is rest periods and forced calls. So what even is a rest period or turnaround time? Well, that's quite easy. It's the time between being dismissed on one shooting day and called in on the subsequent shooting day. There are several labor regulations, and usually they require minimum daily rest periods between shooting days and even minimum weekly rest periods between shooting weeks. And those rest periods can also occur during a shooting day. And during a shooting day, they're usually called meal breaks, and there's a separate tutorial on meal breaks and meal penalties, and you can find the link below. Let's today just focus on the turnaround time. And the turnaround times and the minimum required turnaround times can be defined by several factors. Of course, by the law of a specific country, by the unions that are in place if applicable, by the location where you're shooting. So is it like shooting on a studio lot or a nearby location, a distant location, and of course by the individual job position. So all these can define like what are the minimum daily or weekly rest periods, and also what could be the potential fees if those turnaround times are getting violated. And then you should be aware of the potential consequences of such violations. There could be legal claims. For example, employees can file lawsuits. There can be the loss of insurance coverage. There can be reputational damage as a negative impact for your production company. And of course, penalties and fees can occur. And if you want to prevent such violations from happening, it's all about transparency. So introduce transparent policies, like your company needs to back the decisions of a line producer, production manager, first AD, if they suggest things like, for example, working in shifts or staggering with positions like getting a second AD or more wardrobe crew or additional makeup and hair crew and so on. Then you need a transparent overview. So everybody needs to know what agreements are actually in place and what needs to be considered when it comes to all the relevant restrictions. And then, of course, it's all about transparent timekeeping. So implement an accurate time tracking tool that always helps you to stay ahead of the work hours of all crew members and cast members throughout each shooting day, throughout all weeks, and also with safe methods to securely store all the information. So if issues occur with insurances, for example, weeks or months after principal photography, you still know what has happened. Of course, Yamdu is offering such tools implemented right within Yamdu's production workflow. So let's take a look how this actually works in Yamdu. So in Yamdu, I want to take a look at the time cards section, and I'm here in the time cards of Robert Jones, actually in the personal time cards view. As we can see, I already have a couple of weekly batches here. Some of them have already been paid and approved, but now I'm interested in the week of September 22nd. Now, as you can see, there are already times like filled out, but we are not interested in all those details right now. There are different tutorials how all this works, and you can find the link below, for example, on the calculation of time cards, etc., etc. Now, we're more interested here when it comes to the work end and the work start time between Monday and Tuesday. And here you can see I will switch like the work end on Monday to midnight, and as we start the next day on 8 a.m., now all of a sudden I get a conflict, right? And it literally tells me beware of potential rest period violation. Turnaround time is set to 10 hours, so that's kind of set in his agreement. And actual turnaround time this day is only 8 hours, so there are 2 invaded hours. So it simply shows you a conflict. So let's take a look where this actually comes from. Let's go to the details, and of course we need to go to Robert's payroll and labor agreement settings. And you can see things here like the labor agreement settings, the template that is being used, if he's part of a union or not, and of course also the salary, and if it's a daily rate, a weekly rate, and also the calculation of the hourly rate, which could easily be an odd number. And that matters, of course, also depending on the agreement for such penalty calculations, but we will see this in a second. But we want to go down to the rest periods. And as you can see here, for the rest period, we have a minimum daily rest period, and it's set to 10 hours. In this case, for a standard rate, there could also be differentiations between a studio rate, etc. But in this case, let's just deal with the standard rate of 10 hours and a minimum weekly rest period of 35 hours. You can see I can easily edit this, for example, 38 hours. So it really depends on the labor agreement, of course. For a lot of countries, that's maybe already enough. So you see this warning here, and that's all there is. Why? Because especially in many European countries like Germany, Austria, Italy, etc., it is simply illegal to run into turnaround violations. This does not exist, and there are also no penalties for that. You always have to be aware of your minimum turnaround times or rest periods, and you really have to stick to them. But for Robert, let's do something else. Let's now say we activate actually the penalties for rest period violations. So especially in the US, for example, that is possible that you can violate the turnaround times under certain conditions, and then you have to pay the crew or cast member an additional fee. That can be done and set up here in the penalties for rest period violation settings. So there are several options for the rest period violation penalty type. And as you can see here, we have either a rate per occurrence, a rate pro rata per invaded hour, or something special that's coming soon, like the ongoing penalties until required rest period has been provided. So those are the 3 options you potentially have. And in this case, let's start with rate per occurrence. And then we set the rate per occurrence to one of the following. In this case, let's keep half the daily rate. And yes, of course, it warns me that it will recalculate existing time cards now, right? All right, and see what happened. We still have the conflict. But now in addition, we have a column called rest period violations. And as we can see, we are ending on Monday at midnight, and then at 8 a.m. the next morning, we are starting again. We have a new call time that is a forced call. There is 1 occurrence, and that's worth half the daily rate. So as we saw before, his daily rate is set to $1,600, so he gets $800. If I click here, I also see like the status for the entire batch, and there's the collection of the rest period violation penalties for that week. Once those time cards are being approved, by the way, it will also be added on top to the current stats for Robert. So now let's do something else. Let's go back to his settings. And let's say in this case, his labor agreement foresees a different setting for the penalties. And let's choose prorater per invaded hour as a rest period violation penalty type. And this opens new options. So in this case, for such a day, we have now up to 3 forced call categories. So FC stands for forced call, and it depends on the amount of invaded hours. So that now means the following. It means like your actual rest period, your actual turnaround time between like the time you've been dismissed on one day and called in on the next day, like how long, what was the duration of this? And if it was shorter than the minimum daily rest period that is required by these settings here, it counts the number of invaded hours, like the amount of hours that your kind of night or rest period has been shorter. And in this case, you can have different categories. And we could, for example, say, well, for the first 4 hours, the first 4 invaded hours, we have a certain penalty rate. And we can also reset this, for example, to the first 2 hours, right? And there, let's say we get as a penalty rate the hourly rate. And then there is another category, and it says E for elapsed. So it means for all additional invaded hours, I get, in this case, for example, twice the hourly rate. And let's say there's no third category, and let's hit save. So now we see the rest period violation column value has changed. We still have, of course, the 2 invaded hours, right? And the warning here. But now it's like those 2 invaded hours, they're stated here, and the value of the violation rate. So that's 2 times the hourly rate. It's quite an odd number here because, as we've seen before, due to his guaranteed overtime settings, etc., it's kind of an odd number when it comes to his hourly rate. So now let's even prolong Monday, right? It's even getting worse. So let's say Robert needs to work until 1 o'clock in the morning. So now we have even 3 invaded hours. And you can see here, it's now 3 invaded hours. For the first and the second invaded hour, I get once the hourly rate. And then for the additional invaded hour, I get even twice the hourly rate according to our settings. And that gives me a total of more than $450 just for this one violation. So now let's go back to his settings and change for the second category that we choose the hourly rate with the factor of the previous day's work in. So kind of the, in case Robert has already been in overtime, we take the overtime category and the factors for that time when Robert has been released. And we see all these settings here on top in our overtime premiums and penalties settings, for example, for a regular day, for OT 1, 2, 3, etc. All right, let's hit save. And now, as you can see, it got even more expensive, right? More than $500. Why? Because on the previous day, he has already been way into overtime. So if we click here on Monday, we see the payable hours, and you see when he has been released, he was already in OT3 with a factor of 2.5x. So that's higher than the 2x of the original 2 times the hourly rate for this category. So that's then like 2 times the hourly rate for the first 2 invaded hours. And for the third invaded hour, we actually take the hourly rate with the overtime factor of the previous day's work end. And this is, in this case, 2.5x. So this gives me a total of $514 and something dollars. But as you can imagine, there are even more variations we can do, right? So let's go back to the agreement settings. And now we want to activate subsequent occurrences. So this actually means like if something happens only once, right? One rest period violation, well, you pay X, Y, Z. But if it happens again, usually it becomes even more expensive. So in this case, let's switch back to the penalties for rest period violation as a rate per occurrence. And we had like half the daily rate before, as you can remember. And now let's say for a subsequent occurrence, we still have the rate per occurrence type, but then we say it's a custom rate or daily rate, whichever is higher. So that's a very common setting. And in this case, we want to enter a custom rate of $1,800. So if you remember, we can scroll up. His regular daily rate is $1,600, and now it's set to $1,800, and it should take whatever is higher. So guess what's happening, right? But first of all, let's go back to the time card. It's being recalculated. And for Tuesday, it's switched back to 1 occurrence, half the daily rate, $800. So far, so good. So in this case, for the Tuesday, let's also work until midnight. And of course, immediately I get a second occurrence. It's a subsequent occurrence. And as the custom rate is higher for the subsequent occurrence with $1,800 than the actual daily rate, it of course triggers the $1,800. And for the weekly batch, I can clearly see that now I have a total of $2,600 just for rest period violations. By the way, you can also set up the visibility. So if you just want to have like production or accounting see potential rest period violations and conflicts first, you can do so. And you can also edit those settings here in the project settings and go to payroll, time card visibility, and you can take care who can see like those rest period violations, like everybody immediately, or is it first the production or accounting, for example, that is warned about potential conflicts. All right, so I hope this helps you to have like all your rest period conflicts and violation penalties calculated on the fly with Yamdu. If you're unsure, please always check in with a payroll specialist to help you with this setup. All right, my friends, that's it for today. So if you're asking me, all this sounds like a rest period is something sacred, right? And yeah, here is what I think about forced calls, all right? So, if you think this video is useful, please click like and subscribe. And always remember, she works hard for the money. Good night.